meeting. I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to take care of before we start. Please turn off or silence all of your personal communication devices. Comes in very handy during our meetings. The applicant and members of the public may speak to any item before the Plan Commission unless an exception is made by the Commission. The following rules will apply. The applicant will be given up to 10 minutes to present any information they wish the Commission to consider. Thereafter, members of the public will be given up to 5 minutes to address the specific item before the Commission for consideration. Members of the public may only speak once per agenda item. After the members of the public speak, may ask the applicant to come back up and speak before Plan Commission takes action. The Common Council has adopted rules of decorum for city boards and commissions, including the adoption of a civility pledge. No person shall personally attack a board or commission member, city official or staff, or any other person. No person shall make irrelevant, unduly repetitive, or offensive, threatening, slanderous, defamatory, or obscene remarks, or act in such a manner as to disrupt or disturb the orderly conduct of the meeting. This includes hand clapping, stomping of the feet, whistling, shouting, or other demonstrations. With all that in mind, I see we have a quorum, so let's take roll call, please.
Councilmember Esslinger?
Here.
Mr. Kiefer?
Here.
Ms. Prop?
Here.
Ms. Shireman? Mr. Lowenstein?
Here.
Mr. Nichols? Mr. Bowen? Mr. Coulibaly?
Here.
Ms. Davy?
Here.
Chairman Perry?
Here.
7 present.
All right, great. First item on the agenda is the approval of the May 16th, 2023 minutes. Plan Commission, what's your action?
Move to approve as written.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we can have a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, minutes approved. Item number 1, election of officers. I'm going to pass this off to Mark, and we'll have an election of officers.
Thank you. So it is that time of year we have to do our organizational meeting. I'll try to get this through really quickly so we can get on to regularly scheduled business. First thing we need to do is elect a chair. So I will open the floor for nominations for Plan Commission Chair.
I would like to nominate Tom Perry.
Second. Don't need a second, but thank you. I have to call this 3 times, so second call for nominations. Third and final call for nominations. All right, that makes it very easy with only one. Nominations are closed, so we then do need a motion to appoint Mr. Perry.
Move to appoint Mr. Perry as chair.
Thank you. Now we can do it by voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Thank you. So, with that, congratulations, Mr. Perry, on being named chair. Same thing for vice chair, so I will open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Justin.
He's not on Plan Commission anymore.
I nominate Kathy.
Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Mr. Kiefer.
Third and final call for nominations. Okay, with that, then I do need a motion to close nominations because we have more than one individual.
Move to,
Okay, and we can do that by voice vote. All in favor of closing nominations?
Aye.
And opposed? All right,
I'm
now,
willing to withdraw and defer to Mr. Kiefer.
okay. So with that, we then only have one nominee. We do need a motion to appoint Mr. Kiefer as vice chair.
move to appoint Mr. Kiefer as vice chair.
Thank you. And then we can do it by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, motion carries. With that, I will turn it back over to Chairman Perry.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is a public hearing. It's a conditional use permit amendment request for an institutional use building addition at 621 Evans Street, Solutions Recovery. Trevor Fenrick is Solutions Recovery is the owner, and William Aubrey Consulate Construction is Consolidate Construction is the applicant. Have there been any site inspections? I see 2 for the record. Okay, I'll accept the report as part of our approval. So please present your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Solution Recoveries is requesting a conditional use permit amendment to allow an addition at their existing site at 621 Evans Street. The property has a zoning of I and institutional, and indoor institutional are a conditional use within this district. The site received a conditional use permit on December 11th, 2007 to offer recovery opportunities for adults in a group setting. It's a current air photo of the site. To the north, this is the main recovery center. This was formerly a church. This is the former parsonage that was associated with the church. The site has 28 off-street parking stalls, another accessory storage structure, and trash enclosure located on the south side of the driveway. The site has triple frontage with Evans, Parkway, and Bowen to the west. And currently with traffic flow, traffic gets onto the site off of Evans Street through a one-way, and traffic flows to the west with an exit only off of Bowen Street. This is the proposed site plan that was submitted. The proposed addition is approximately 3,500 square feet. Mostly it's going to be served as a vestibule and gathering area for the center. The applicant states in their narrative that there won't be any change to the existing use and will be continued to be used as a nonprofit recovery community center. And they'll be providing events, support meetings, and recovery lounge. They're not anticipating any additional clients to the site. The center hosts on average 3 meetings per day and has an approximate daily footprint of 75 individuals, which includes staff and guests. This is the proposed landscape plan that was submitted for the addition. Not a lot is required for this project and will require building foundation plantings, paved area plantings, and yards. They pretty much meet or exceed the required building foundations and paved areas, and are slightly deficient with the yards planting requirements. One thing that was noticed this afternoon, burning bushes, a type of shrub that's prohibited by the zoning ordinance as an invasive species. So during site plan review, those will have to be swapped out with a different variety of shrub. And we need better clarification on the acacias. There are a couple of species which are restricted by the DNR, so staff will need clarification on what species or specific species the acacia will be. Building elevations, the applicant is going to be using similar materials to the existing building, which consists of a combination of brick, glass, and lap siding, which will match the existing materials on the building. The institutional district does not have design standards or exterior design standards, but they can still be reviewed as part of the conditional use process. The elevations, as shown, the south elevation has 48% class 1 materials, the east elevation 86%, and the west elevation has 82% class 1 materials, and the north elevation is not being affected by this project. When compared to design standards in a commercial district, which has a 50% minimum for Class 1 materials. This well exceeds what would be required in a commercial district, other than the south facade, which is just slightly less than the 50% minimum for Class 1. Signage plans have not been submitted. If any changes to signage is proposed, it'll have to go through regular site plan review and meet the minimum standards for the institutional district. Lighting and photometric plan has not been submitted. That will be addressed during site plan review. Any lighting changes will need to meet minimum lighting standards within the parking lots and not exceed the maximums allowed at the property lines. Stormwater management was submitted and is currently reviewed by the Department of Public Works. And with that, these are just some existing shots of the exterior, just to give you a feel for what the existing building looks like and what types of materials they're proposing. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the amendment to the conditional use permit as presented with 3 conditions.
Thank you. Plan Commission, do you have any technical questions for the staff at this time? Any technical questions for the staff at this time? I have one. How are we going to ensure that the new addition is actually of similar materials? Because we have done that in the past, and then all of a sudden not similar materials are used.
Yeah, during final site plan review, we can get the exact type of brick and material that is being used to make sure it is, brick's a little easier because it's like color. Obviously, some of the ones we've had issues in the past where, let's call them non-typical materials that were a little harder to tell exactly what they are. In an instance like this with what they're proposing to use, we'll be able to get the specifics on it. One other element to mention, and maybe I missed it, Jeff, if you did say it, there was a neighborhood meeting conducted prior to this project moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Any other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, since this is a public hearing, I will declare the public hearing open and ask the applicant if they have a statement for the Plan Commission. Is the applicant here? If you could approach the podium and state your name and address for our records, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
My name is William Aubrey. I live at W8716 Spring Road in Hortonville, Wisconsin. I have nothing further to add beyond our submittal.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this agenda item? Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this agenda item? Okay, having seen none, I'll close the public hearing. Since there were no other members speaking, we don't have to hear from the applicant again. Plan Commission, what's your action?
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, I'm seeing none, so let's have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Esslinger,
Aye.
Ms. Prop,
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kulabali,
Aye.
Ms. Davy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer,
Aye.
Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Wonderful, thank you. Item number 3 is a specific implementation plan amendment for signage at 515 East Parkway Avenue. Boys and Girls Club of Oshkosh is the owner, and Martinson and Eisel Incorporated is the applicant. Have there been any site inspections of this site? C2 noted, 3 noted. Okay, thank you. I will accept the staff report as part of the record. Please present your report.
Thank you. So the subject site is the Boys and Girls Club. It is located on the south side of East Parkway Avenue in Zone Institutional District with a plan development overlay, primarily surrounded by residential land uses. Here's a view of the subject site as it previously was. In 2022, there was an SIP approved for modifications and additions to the Boys and Girls Club site. Here's kind of a site plan that shows that, as well as some signs they're proposing. So the applicant has come to the city with plans for signage for the site, including a total of 14 signs, with 1 being a ground sign, 2 fence-mounted signs, and 11 wall-mounted signs. 8 of the wall signs include logos of corporate sponsors. Code prohibits off-premise signage, so this does require a base standard modification. And according to the applicant, the intent is to give recognition to the donors who contributed to the site improvements. So here are some of the sign renderings. So for example, you have Verve up here, which is considered an off-premise sign. The Boys and Girls Club, which is typical signage. An entrance sign, which is for Community First Credit Union entrance, which is allowed under the ordinance, as that is just a naming sign. This facade, we have an Amcor sign logo, which would require a BSM, as that's off-premise advertising. Named sign here. Future corporate sponsorship logo, which again BSM for that one. Donor name on the gymnasium facade, Bergstrom Learning Center sign, so that'd be off-premise advertising as well. Head Start building, so that would not require it. And then we have fence signage being proposed, and that also requires a BSM, as code prohibits signage from being placed on fences. So staff did some research on other Boys and Girls Club sites in the area to see how their signage compares to what's being requested here. So we did find several that have just text signage for corporate sponsors. So this is the West Green Bay sign that has like a naming sign right there. The Greater Green Bay, kind of the same thing with name sign there. Fond du Lac has a naming sign. Same with Sturgeon Bay. And Stevens Point. Wausau too, and nameplate has the sponsorship. Here's a newer one. This is the Menasha site, which does not have any corporate sponsorship signage. Appleton also does not have any sponsorship signage, and neither does Berlin. So this is kind of a unique request, and we've not granted BSMs for institutional uses to have off-premise advertising in the past. Staff is recommending that Plan Commission make the determination on if the off-premise advertising is appropriate for the site. So the same goes for the wall signage as well as the fencing signage.
Yeah, so as Brian mentioned, a bit of a unique one. Doing some research, looking at our code would just automatically allow it if it was just, like the word Bergstrom or some of the ones that were in the sign package. If it just says the word, code already allows you to do that. Once you institute logos, the zoning ordinance treats them as off-premise advertising. So the discussion point really for today is twofold. It's one, is this body and then ultimately council comfortable approving the logos? Because that would be a change from what our code typically allows in the base standard. And then the second piece of it, our code right now strictly prohibits adding signage, exterior signage to fences. And they have 2 locations where they're proposing that as well. So both of those are kind of what's on the table for discussion and ultimately a recommendation out of Plan Commission onto council. This would be a bit of a precedent-setting decision which way you go one way or another with this, as up to this point we have not had these type of requests. So really, this is kind of the time that we felt appropriate to turn it over to Plan Commission, get your feedback and see what you think of these things, and then be able to provide some information ultimately on to council so they can weigh in to determine if they feel this type of logos and advertising exterior signage is appropriate in the city.
All right, thank you. Plan Commission, do you have any technical questions for the staff? Ms. Prop?
I didn't understand if you said it. Are there any fencing name logos on other sites?
Right now, the only place that fencing, logo, those type of things exist are on interior fences where the sign, think of a ballpark. You frequently see those. But they point internal to the development and are not considered signage by the sign ordinance. As of right now, we do not have any fence signage that points outward that is in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Could you point, I was having trouble pinpointing where the fence signing is. Is it on the side on the fencing? I mean, I was just having a little trouble seeing that.
Yeah, I can pull the plan up here. So here is One fence sign, so this is facing the streets.
Would be Monroe Street. Am I thinking about the orient myself? correctly?
Yes, I believe that's Monroe. And then this one up here, this is kind of hard to tell in the plan if it's what it's actually oriented towards.
Yeah, that one, if it was, on the, let's say, facing west, probably would say it's not necessarily have a base standard. On the east, as it is visible from the street, we would probably say it does need the base standard.
So that's inside the field, but you would see it from the road?
If it was facing into the field, I think we would say it does, the right sign regulations don't apply. If it's on the fence facing out, then the sign regulations would apply. And maybe the applicant can kind of clarify which side of the fence that was intended to be on for you.
Any other technical questions for the staff? Okay, I'm seeing none. This is not a public hearing, but I do love public comment. And so at this time, I'm going to open a public comment period and ask if the applicant is here if you wish to address. Is the applicant here and wish to address? Approach the podium and state your name and address for our records, please.
Hi, my name is Tracy Ogden. I live at 8021 Cavendish Road, Neenah. I'm also the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Oshkosh. I know this is an odd request. It is a very big project for our community. The Boys and Girls Club is investing $18 million into that project and into the block. We have a lot of signage because we have 5 entrances for our kids, to keep the kids safe. So you talk about Head Start, that's where our littles come in. And if you know Jamie Wilcox, he does not know this building is being named after him, so don't tell him. The Radford entrance is our elementary kids. We've got the teen center side, which is our big kids. We've got a new administrative building that our staff will be coming in. But then on the Monroe Street side, we're building a community center to house 24 nonprofits to work to case manage families. That's a completely separate entrance for other people. So our signage, we really are adding a lot of signage because we want to make sure that it's clear and safe for all of our kids that are coming into the building. That building serves over 2,000 kids and will serve over 2,000 kids when it's done, all of the buildings that are being done. So the 4 people that, the 4 businesses that have asked for logos, their biggest thing was that they wanted their employees to know that they were a part of the Boys and Girls Club. These are 4 businesses that are longstanding in the community. They've got a good track record. This is not something that'll be changed next year. Our Radford Club that we built 26 years ago is still the Radford Club. It's still the Oshkosh Bagosh, middle school center. Those will stay. And we really just want to make sure that we're, $18 million is a very, very big lift for us and for this community. And these businesses have stepped forward with significant amounts of money to help us make this project possible to serve our kids in this community. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I can. I know you have a question. Can I answer the question about the fence, about the field? Okay. The multi-purpose field, that field just opened last week. It's different than a baseball field because we don't have a scoreboard. We don't have big lights. It's just a field for kids to run and play. And after not having green space for a very long time, a lot of very happy kids and staff right now. But that signage is just to thank the sponsor that helped put in a turf field. So now that we have an outdoor space for kids, year round, our playground that used to be on the northwest corner and on the street is moving behind the main building. So it'll go in between the new administrative building and the new gym. So our kids are tucked in off the street corner, and safer, so it'll have a fence around it. Again, that is not being named after a business, that's going to be named after a family.
Which way does it face?
The one on Monroe, that one?
That one.
We had not exactly decided based on conversation
Okay.
where that, really needed to go. It wouldn't face the street, it would face the building.
So face this direction. You'd read it from the building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the courtyard, the playground, that's being named after J.R. Betty. That was a gift from his family for him. Yes?
So is that facing in as well, or is it facing out? The sign on that?
Quite honestly, that one could go either way because that was just something that his family wanted to, do in honor of his memory of how much he loved the club.
And so that one, if it would be on the face into the basketball court, would not need anything because it's just a name.
I have the feeling too that the gym is going to end up being a name. I don't think it's going to be a logo. And that gym won't be done until next summer. We've offered more landscaping. I don't know how quite possibly we could put more shrubs on this block. We are doing everything we can to make it as beautiful as possible. None of the signs are flashy, illuminated, so we're trying to be very thoughtful of our neighbors. We just really want to be thoughtful that people know where they're going to, and we really want to thank the people that are making this possible. We've raised $16 million in a year and a half to make this build possible for our kids, and we're very proud of that. And the people who are a part of it are really, really proud of that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Mr. Kubali has a question.
The general sponsor very picky, required specific placement for those sign, or did you take it on you to put them this way?
Nobody came to me and said, I'm not going to give you money if you won't put our logo outside. No, but nobody had that conversation. I just think that we should be thoughtful and we should thank the people that are being so generous.
Thank you. Any other questions before I ask the public? All right, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment on this agenda item? Are there any other members of the public that wish to comment on this agenda item? All right, I see none, so I'm going to close the public comment period. Plan Commission, the action is upon you.
So before that,
Oh.
Because this is a little different than we normally do and we don't give you findings and everything, Brian did in the staff report list some potential findings. But Plan Commission, whichever way they go with this thing, will need to make findings, basically articulate why you do what you do as part of your motion.
Well, the motion to adopt the findings and recommendations is stated in the staff.
But there aren't any.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say,
okay, then
yeah,
then
there's
we have
no,
to have,
there's,
we have
there's
to
no
have
recommendation.
discussion and then someone makes a motion.
You need a motion on the floor to discuss.
thought.
So when you make the motion, you need to articulate why you're making that motion. What are your findings for backing up the motion you're making?
Okay,
I was
Mr.
gonna say,
Kubal.
essentially, there's no recommendation.
There
from
is
the
no
So we
recommendation.
have to make the recommendation.
You have to make a recommendation and then state the findings and why you're making that recommendation.
Mr. Essingler.
Thank you. I move that we move forward with the suggestions of the Boys and Girls Club for the different signage that we have here. As the lady stated, there's a considerable amount of money that is going into this, and I think the people that do donate are doing it on their own free will. And we hear so many times of public-private partnerships, and the reality of that is sometimes taxpayer money flows in from the public side. Don't know if we've had that here, but the fact of the matter is, things like this, and this could be, I think the first one here, this could alleviate the tax payer's side of this, because quite frankly, they can go out, and I used to be in advertising, so I know you can go out and sell these. I don't see any negative impact on the neighborhood whatsoever. And again, I think it's just a good way to get money for this, and some great businesses that we have in the community, or great names of residents that we have or have had in the community. So I think the advantage far outweighs anything that there might be any disadvantage here. So again, I say we move forward and vote in the affirmative for the plan.
Okay, so the motion, just to paraphrase, the motion is to approve the recommendations as stated by the applicant
Correct.
as part of this plan.
That includes logos.
And that includes logos, because that's the applicant's recommendation.
That's the request.
So we are allowing a base standard modification for the use of logos, that would be technically how we want to?
Correct. That would be part of the base standards as Ryan outlaid in the staff report. You can just suggest if you do recommend to approve as requested by the applicant. You can just include the base standards as outlined in the staff report. It would be necessary to accomplish the proposal.
We have a motion on the floor. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, thank you. Plan Commission, is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Prop?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree because this is a precedent-setting thing to have a logo. And I think the names are wonderful, and they are very respectfully and well done, the names. I have no objection to that. But because this opens the floodgates, I will be voting no on this.
Thank you. Ms. Davy?
I will also be voting no on this. Again, I agree with the naming rights and the text, but the logos disturb me, not only because it's precedent setting, but, for example, when I first opened my packet and I saw the Verve sign, I thought, oh, great, they're putting in a place where I can go, I bank at Verve, that'll be great. I think that it would be, I think the logos are going to be more confusing than helpful, and I would hope that even children can learn to read the word Verve instead of having to look at a logo.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Kubali?
Yeah, I am fully with Kathy. And, I think setting precedence is dangerous. If we don't have to do it, if the sponsors are willing to give and there is no contingency, I think there's no need to create a situation that is not sustainable. So with that, I would rather vote no.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Kiefer?
And I've been sitting here thinking, where else could this take place? What else could happen? If we allow the logos now, where else could this pop up in other developments and stuff like that? And I'm sure there's endless ways that could come up, but, I think it does add a little bit, having the logos in there does add a little bit to the property. I think it's a little bit more, I think the ones you showed up there were kind of boring. It was just the words in those other centers, and a little bit hard to read. And I do think, that with the amount of money that has been donated, I think it's kind of part of selling that donation, although, it wasn't contingent on the signage, but I think it's something that these donors, kind of more or less deserve something like this. Obviously, they can do things inside too, so I'm worried about the precedent setting kind of thing, but I'm also thinking that it does add a little bit to the building and the area, so.
Any other public? Mr. Lowenstein?
So I want to say something kind of totally different. Something slightly different in that I'm not opposed to logos on the building if they're tasteful. I'm actually really worried about the precedent of fence logos and allowing fences to be covered with logos. So it feels to me that on the building, that's a reasonable request as long as they're not overwhelmingly scaled. But I was actually sort of envisioning baseball kind of diamond on the external fencing in terms of sponsorships and logos that could be a problem for me. So I actually, in some ways, though I hadn't formulated my own approval, I'm okay with having the logos on the building. I just don't want them external facing on fencing because that could be on a property line and that could be really unsightly for a property. And I was thinking of the neighbors across the street who are looking at a fencing logo on the property line bothered me more than anything else. So I think logos are fine actually, but I'm kind of opposed to sort of allowing fencing logos that could be very unsightly as we go forward as a precedent. So it's a kind of a different way, and I think I oppose the resolution as it stands, but might be open to having a modified resolution if we could state perhaps sizes, or tastefulness is not a standard, but could that be, could there be sizes, and could there be, I would suggest number 1, but not number 2.
Yes,
Just in terms of
Plan Commission could modify conditions any way you see fit.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? Ms. Davy?
Go a second time. I liked what John said. The logos could be put inside the building and given recognition to the very generous donors that way. I'm just not comfortable with them being on the outside where somebody driving by might think, not realize that this is the Boys and Girls Club and might think that it's one of the other. And I know theoretically, we all are smarter than that, and of course we'd know that's not it. But that's not necessarily true. So I'm still not comfortable with the logos outside. I think that we should suggest that they put them inside.
Ms. Prop?
Depending on how this goes, I don't want to see any signage on fences. That is, but it sounded like if they're going to be pointing inward, then that's a moot point.
Correct. If the signs point inward, we don't, they are not signs as defined by city ordinance.
Okay, if they point inward then and they're legal, I'm fine. If they point outward, I don't like signage on fences.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so if a
Yes,
baseball
Mr. Kiefer.
diamond wants to put, any of our city parks or Oshkosh West, Oshkosh North, Lourdes, they want to put up interior advertising signage on the interior of their fencing facing home plate, kind of thing, that would be okay?
Yeah, under the sign ordinance that we regulate through zoning, that is not regulated. That is not part of our sign code.
Okay, so because I get to usually have the last word, I'm going to express my opinion on this as well. I am also very concerned about setting precedent at our level. We are a recommendation at this point to the council, and the council can set precedent as well. We frequently have things that go to the council that either aren't what we thought it would be or we voted it would be, and it was changed or modified. So there's always that option. The second is speaking as a nonprofit executive. One of the concerns I have is, I'm looking for space in the city, and I could put up all kinds of signage all over the place if we set this precedent. But what happens when the main sponsor or the main sign changes their name, gets consolidated with another credit union, gets bought out by another big company, goes out of business? Looking at it as a fiscally responsive move on my part, I would have to change. If they even change their logo, I would have to change that logo, and they may not sponsor me anymore. They may not sponsor this anymore. And what could happen is that it stays the same. It becomes an eyesore. It's not what the people ultimately want if they're not going to support the change the sign in the long run. It's up to the nonprofit, which has to spend money that they may or may not have. Because the nonprofit goes year by year. So I will not support this motion as stated as well, just simply because of the practicality and the precedent-setting motion, the precedent-setting that this would be. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Esslinger?
Aye.
Ms. Prop? Mr. Lowenstein?
No.
Mr. Kulabali?
No.
Ms. Davy?
No.
Vice Chair Kiefer?
No.
Chairman Perry?
No.
Motion denied.
So it'll go on to council with that information. At next week's council meeting on Tuesday, they'll take it up and have that discussion at their level.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is the general development plan and specific implementation plan approval for a multifamily development on the east side of Oregon Street, southwest of Ripple Avenue. Premier Ripple Road 2 LLC is the owner, and Aaron Breidenfeld and Robert Lee and Associates is the applicant. Has there been any site inspections of this particular site? There are 3 3, myself included. Okay, I'll accept the staff report as part of the record. Please present your summary.
Thank you. The subject site is about 16 and a half acres in size, located on the east side of Oregon Street, south of West Ripple Avenue. It is currently vacant and zoned MR12 PD. Surrounding area is primarily vacant and agricultural uses, as well as residential uses to the west and north. Here's the current vacant site. In 2017, Common Council approved the existing 96-unit multifamily development immediately to the north of the site, which is their Phase 1 development. They're now requesting approval of Phase 2, which will be 8 12-unit apartment buildings. That use is permitted in the MR12 district. There was a neighborhood meeting held in May of this year. Neighbors did voice some concerns, mostly related to stormwater impacts, privacy and landscaping, site lighting, and property maintenance. So here's the site plan. The site will be accessed from an existing Phase 1 driveway off of Oregon Street, and they will need a cross-access agreement to have that shared driveway access. The plan does meet all setback requirements and impervious surface ratio requirement for the MR12 zoning district. The site shows 2 refuse enclosures, one kind of being in the interior part of the site and then one on the east part of the site. It will be 6-foot tall cedar fencing, which will meet height and material requirements for dumpster enclosures. Here's the landscaping plan. It is meeting building foundation landscaping point requirements, except they did overcalculate the perennial points, so they can swap those out for deciduous shrubs to meet that foundation point requirements. For paved areas, they are meeting the point requirement. However, they are missing some trees at the parking row ends, total of 19. So they will need to add those trees during site plan review. For street frontage, they are showing some trees there. However, they're short 60 street frontage landscaping points, so those also can be added during site plan review. For yard landscaping, they are exceeding the point requirements. There was one thing that we noted today in looking further at the landscape plan was that there's a species of barberry shrub shown in the landscape schedule that is prohibited, so that will need to be swapped out with a different shrub. For buffer yards, as it's abutting single-family residential to the west, there's a 0.2 opacity buffer yard requirement. They are showing a 5-foot tall berm as well as 6-foot tall fencing to meet that buffer yard requirement. So the combination of the berm, the 6-foot tall solid vinyl fencing, and the distance from the property lines to the development is meeting the buffer yard requirements from the 0.2 opacity requirement. Here's the signage plan. So they're showing a monument sign near the entrance to the site. It does meet setback requirements. They're requesting a BSM to have increased sign height to 7 feet 5 inches, where the maximum height is 5 feet. Also requesting BSM for slightly more area, up to a little over 27 square feet, where code allows a maximum of 25 square feet. Staff does not have any concerns with that, as it is consistent in matching the Phase 1 monument sign, also based on the traffic speeds along Oregon Street and the setback from the property line. A slightly larger sign seems appropriate, and they are providing some shrubs around that sign to offset the BSM. For site lighting, the applicant has submitted a preferred photometric plan, which includes 3 entrance drive light poles and then all wall packs to provide lighting. However, they will need a BSM for that, as it's below the minimum of 0.4 foot candles for parking and drive areas, showing 0.0 foot candles for most all parking and drive areas. And this is intended to reduce the visible lighting for the neighboring properties to the west. Staff did discuss this plan with the police department, and they had concerns related to the reduced lighting levels, and they would recommend the lighting meet the 0.4 foot candle requirements for the parking and circulation areas to provide a safe environment for the occupants. And based on that, staff is recommending a BSM, or recommending denial of the BSM, and recommending that they go with a code compliant lighting plan, which they did submit a plan for, which shows 20-foot tall light poles, and then the lighting levels meeting the 0.4 minimum at the for all parking and drive areas. Here's the building elevations. So it is consistent with the Phase 1 apartment building designs. Exterior is primarily Dutch lap siding, along with a brick veneer knee wall. They are requesting a BSM for one of the buildings, be the northernmost building, which has a street-facing facade of about 8.5% door and window area, where code requires a 20% door and window area for street-facing facades. And this is to provide consistency with that Phase 1 development for their street-facing elevations. They also note that there is a large setback of about 330 feet, where it should not be a problem or site deficiency having that lower level of door and window areas. So staff is supportive of that, as well as it will be consistent with the Phase 1 development, and the large setback kind of offsets that, and there are some overstory trees in between the right-of-way and that facade, which will also kind of break it up. So with that, staff recommends approval of the GDP SIP with the findings and conditions in your staff report.
All right, thank you for your report. Plan Commission, are there any technical questions for the staff on this agenda item? Ms. Prop?
I believe I read that there is some recreation area
Yes, kind of in the central area of the site.
in the center.
Yep, so it'd be right in here. And actually, one item they didn't mention is there are some plantings there that will need to be moved kind of more to the perimeter of that recreation area, so it's an open space per code.
Okay, but basically that whole, call it a square rectangle is a recreation area.
Correct.
Yeah, right in the middle here.
And beyond that, they did have to do parkland dedication when they started Phase 1. So there is actual land dedicated just to the northeast of here, adjacent to Phase 1, that was dedicated to the city as parkland. So at some point, you know, when the economics work and when we can actually develop that park, the city will be putting a full park out there as well, because that land dedication did take place.
Okay, is that adequate for this development as well?
You know, Jeff stepped out. We did. Jeff, can I get you to?
He shouldn't be talking.
Yeah, can you come up for us, Jeff? Sorry. It sounds like they're slightly under. We'll get a little better. I know he was reviewing it for us.
Yeah, with the land dedication with Phase 1, they're slightly deficient than what would be required with the new addition. So they're going to make up that difference with fee in lieu of.
It was a relatively small, like
Okay.
hundreds
so
of feet they were short.
Two phases together then,
Correct.
Correct.
slightly deficient.
The land area is.
The land area.
I did talk to the parks director, and he did not have any concerns with the slightly smaller size. I believe the park dedication, I think, is 3.5 acres.
That was what was previously dedicated.
Correct.
Okay,
Factor in
there's no additional being dedicated.
No, they dedicated it. The area they had available, they dedicated as part of Phase 1.
Correct. And that was supposed to cover Phase 2.
The intent was to cover both. It's just ended up being slightly deficient. So they will have to make that up with some fees in lieu of.
So when you include this part with the park that was dedicated, they're still short?
Just a little bit, yep.
Okay.
With Phase 1 plus Phase 2, the area they had left to dedicate is just short, so they'll have to pay a small fee in lieu of to make up for it.
Any other, Mr. Kiefer?
Has there been a stormwater plan approved, or is this still being?
It has not been final approval through the city, but yes, they have submitted stormwater management plans that are being reviewed by Public Works.
And that is gonna be adequate to capture the existing runoff and then anything that's generated from the buildings? Is that everything be directed there and?
Justin,
So yeah, we're still in the process of reviewing the plans to make sure they conform to municipal code, but initial indications are yes, it will. They do have an easement that runs east off the property that drains to the creek.
Any other questions, technical questions from? Is the monument sign that's 50% bigger, it is far enough back so not to impede driveway viewing?
it is well outside of the clear sight triangle. The clear sight triangle would be right, Brian, if you can show right where the corner is. They are significantly out of the clear sight triangle.
Okay. All right, I'm going to allow public comment on this agenda item, so I'm going to open the public comment period and ask for a statement from the applicant. Is the applicant here tonight? If you'd like to approach the podium and state your name and address for our records.
Good evening, Jared Schmidt with REL, 1250 Centennial Center Boulevard in Hobart, Wisconsin. Appreciate the opportunity to speak before you and to bring this project forward to the city for consideration. Appreciate staff and the efforts that they've put forth to get us to this point as we work through a complicated process in general of land development. Along with me is also some representatives of Pre-3 Premier, Joe, their attorney, and Josh on the development side. So if there's any other technical questions relative to operations, I'll probably defer to those folks. But as far as site development and general plans that have been provided to the city at this point, I'll do my best to answer that. As staff indicated, we did have a public hearing. We hosted a public open house to present our project in advance of going through the formal city submittal process. Felt that was an important opportunity to get input from the community members, largely from the town as this borders the township, but still important to hear the voice of those that have to live in and around the development. From that meeting, we were able to make some distinct changes to the site plan that we think are an improvement as a result of that communication and what those owners had suggested. I will not say we can make everything perfect. We'll never be able to, but we did, from a development team's perspective, do what we felt was reasonable and helped improve the aesthetics as well as the operation of the site relative to the neighbors. Just real quickly, a couple of those things. There's discussion of this general placement. This has historically been a wooded area, undeveloped. It happens to be zoned for multifamily. It was purchased with the intent for multifamily. We're now in our second stage and would like to build out that vision. So the site has been largely cleared. Right now, the building setback to the west side, to the property owner side, where most of the residential sit, is a side yard setback of 30 feet. I think our nearest building to that property line, with the exception of the office, is 120 feet. From our meeting with the property owners till this meeting, we increased that distance by about 10 feet, just to give a little bit more spacing. Also, when we went to the public meeting, there was no indication or decisions made on screening or buffering to the west side. The city allows a good amount of opportunity or options to meet buffering. Because of that and because of the meeting, we did identify a fence and a berm combination. There's a fence on the southwest portion, as well as on the northwest portion where the driveway gets closer to the property line than any other part of our property. And then we do have a 5-foot tall berm that segments in between. From a use standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, the developer felt that providing a combination helps meet the intent, or at least the wording that we heard from the neighbors, that we want a little bit more definitiveness between the development. We don't just want flat grass and some trees in between, because we want a physical barrier. So we did this by providing what I think meets and exceeds the code minimum for the city. So we're excited about what is there. We think it'll be a nice function and fit well within that area. And what we also did is we did hold the berm and the fence off of the property line a little bit. So if there's large standing trees at the common property line, perhaps those can stay. Also, as we head from the properties to the west, east towards the berm, generally speaking, not 100%, but a majority of that property drains directly east onto our property. So we allow that water to continue to be able to run off those properties. We'll collect it in a swale at the base of the berm and then pipe it through, and then ultimately pass that water through our stormwater pond and then out to the navigable waterway east towards the railroad tracks. One of the things, and word easement was discussed, is that the property owner actually purchased a strip of land in the town of Black Wolf as a means to provide a direct discharge point for the stormwater feature to allow the project to happen. City code is pretty restrictive when you look at it relative to surrounding communities, where we have to manage an unlimited storm event to a right-of-way or to a water of the state. So they actually invested a pretty significant amount of dollars to purchase several acres of land to accommodate the city code relative to stormwater. In addition to that, one of the questions and one of the deviations from standard that we did request was a reduction in site lighting. There's a lot of discussion that, generally speaking, the phase 1 hasn't impacted the property owners. Obviously, you can see it. I'm paraphrasing, so please don't. I hope I don't misrepresent what I heard at the meeting. Is that our preference isn't there, but it hasn't been disruptive beyond the fact that we can see it. And it sounds like the lighting is extreme. This site, as proposed, we wanted to put 3 street lights in to enter the site, coupled with wall packs. Code, in order to be code compliant, requires 38 lights within this development. Premier has tens of thousands of units developing this specific model all over the state. This is probably our 15th that we've helped them develop. We don't have light poles in any but one other site at all. So the 3 lights to provide a guided entrance is increased from what our typical standard is. Now, I'm only sharing that for background, not necessarily say your code is inaccurate. It's just that it is fairly restrictive and fairly intense from a lighting standpoint. And our desire is to try to work with the neighbors to minimize that. So 20-foot poles, 38 of them, A, significant investment, B, significant amount of light, and just shining to make that go. Now we have dark sky compliant lights, so that light's shining down. It's not like the old metal halide that's blasting out, but it's still evident and it has changed for the neighbors. So our hope is, despite the fact that there has been a suggestion that we should meet code, that perhaps there's a middle ground. Perhaps it's 6 or 8 lights within the circle of the paved area, drive lanes, internal to the site versus the code compliant 38. So we would ask that the commission recommend that to the council to reduce that overall total. As far as other deviations, we talked about the sign. We're hopeful we'll support that to be consistent with the developed to the north. And then also the exterior percentage on the building face that is over 300 feet from the roadway. So hopeful that you'll also accept that deviation from your standards. But all in all, we're really excited about the development. It's a multifamily site, but it has extremely low density at about 5.5 units per acre. Very low relative to a traditional multifamily site. We just know we're excited about the location. We're excited to be in the city and excited about the opportunity to continue forward. Happy to take any more questions. Happy to provide any more insight relative to the site design or the building design if there's any questions from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to allow public comment to occur first. At this time, I'm going to open public comment to any member of the general audience. Is there any member of the audience that wishes to speak on this particular agenda item? If you could approach this podium and state your name and address for our records, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Ronald Winter. I live at 3980 Oregon Street. So I was one of the first tenants in Phase 1 5 years ago. So I'm truly blessed by living there, and I was surprised by the changes that took place. Only thing that I would comment, or several comments, is that living in the apartments over there in Premier, we have to follow, of course, Premier's guidelines for living there. Of course, the non-smoking on the balconies, we understand that. When we have to grill our suppers, whatever, we have to be 15 feet away from the building. So right now, Premier suggests that we have like 2 vehicles. We have to park 1 vehicle inside of a parking of our garage, the attached garage, and then a second vehicle by the garage door. The additional parking was for guest parking. They did allow us to work with management though and say, hey, we can park in guest parking if we're a resident, because the problem that we have in the first building is we have to back out into traffic. Understanding there's 96 units in Phase 1, if you have a car or 2 cars in a family, there's a lot of traffic now that only enters and exits out on, what's the name of that road again? Oregon Street, yeah. Because the exit that was designed and built for Ripple Road, of course, we're not allowed to use that. So at the current time, everybody has to go out from Phase 1 on Oregon Street. And so some of us may have some concerns about, I got pickup trucks parking next to me and I have to back out into traffic. Hopefully they abide by the speed limits of, someone's posted at 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. So you're going to have residential activity along with us guys grilling. So that's one concern. The other concern that I have over the last 5 years, when we first started occupying the buildings, we heard there might be a future plan for a dog park. Now, I'm not a dog owner. And when the apartments were built and put in place, I was there before the driveways were put in place or any sod or anything. Once the ground was leveled, the sod came in, and then later on they planted and seeded the the grass area. But tenants were advised to don't let your dogs pee and poop on the sodded area. Go into the area that was seeded. Because you know what dogs can do with the urine problem, a lot of brown spots. So, not everybody abides by the rules. Premier is good, though, at providing bags for the people that live there. But wouldn't it be nice if now we're going to have how many more residents living in the area? We talk about a recreation area. We got to consider, and if there was a demographics to the people that live at phase one, I would say there's more dogs than kids, so they have no place to go other than around the building. And of course, our retention pond is out there, and they can walk around between the driveway and then a sidewalk and a narrow band of grass between the sidewalk and a retention plant. So there is areas that the dogs can go in, but we have people, we're going to have kids, we're going to have dogs. How much better would Premier be to have a facility that's advertising we're luxury apartments and they take animals? Well, what about the animals? What about the kids? Where are they playing? I don't want to see those kids in the driveways playing. Is there a rec area? I see a proposal for one here. And what about the dogs? Where are they going to go? So it's just something that sometimes we overlook, the actual people living there and what their needs are, other than the building we live in and the places we park our cars. What about that rec area and the usage of that area? That's about all I have. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Please approach the podium and state your name and address for our records, please.
My name is Dennis. Got kind of a cough, but Dennis Hughes. I live at 4046 Oregon Street. I'm in the middle house on the left. I was at all the meetings when they had this development started. I have had no problems with any of the development so far. They're nice. They take care. We don't have problem with the traffic. We don't have problem with people traveling in the backyards. The woods is gone now. We miss that. We've missed our wildlife, of course, the turkeys, the deer, and now this year we're missing the birds. Believe it or not, I've got a calendar that I marked down the hummingbirds, the orioles, and the rest of we're not getting them back. We're losing them. But anyway, I know that the lighting, the developer said they try to work with us with the lighting. And I hope you people can keep the lighting down so that it doesn't shine, because we do get a lot of light. I'm in the middle house. You see there's the driveway. And when they drive in, just down a little bit, right there. That driveway from when they go to the west, that goes right into my yard. And I know with a 5-foot berm that they want to put in, 5 foot, your headlights wouldn't even, they'd go right over the top. It's going to be a glare. I'm in favor of having a nice tree line, high beam, or a high berm, but I'll never see it in my lifetime if a tree only grows a foot a year. So, but I would be in favor of a nice 8-foot fence. I talked to some of the other neighbors next to me. They're in favor of a fence also. It would be right on the property line. That way, we can do what we want on our side of the line. If we want to put up some shrubs, put up a pine tree on one side, it's our property on our side. On the other side, if you put up a berm like they're planning on, they're still got property on the other side of the berm. And then who's going to maintain it? They have to maintain it. It's not going to be a separation from my lot line to the berm. If it's maintained, fine. And I know it gives us more room. If I put up a fence right on our property line, it closes us in. But I guess in the long run, I would just as soon see that. I know one of my other neighbors, they want a berm with a fence on top of it. It gives us 5 foot and a 6-foot fence or 8-foot fence. You've got privacy. So if they could do that, that's fine too. But I think the developer said with the berm, they probably wouldn't be able to put a fence on top of it. But we've only got a berm where they're planning, where I live, them 3 or 4 houses, that's just a berm. That's only 5 foot. There's no privacy. But otherwise, we've had no problems, and they told us they would work with us 5 years ago, and I hope they continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this agenda item? Go ahead and approach the podium and state your name and certainly approach the stadium and state your name and address for our records, please.
My name is Keith Burles. We live at 4078 Oregon Street, and we're the southern most property, and we have 200-foot extra compared to the rest of them. Yeah, our thing is, for me, if you have the berm isn't quite gonna do what we think it's supposed to do by putting either a fence on top and making that berm go all the way around the properties, even in back of ours. Right now, there's just that 6-foot fence. And it's more just to have the privacy that, hey, they have their sector and we have ours. My next question is like Denny is, who's gonna maintain the west side of their property line? Because there's trees all along there now, and either I want them taken down because who's gonna maintain it? If they go bad, they come on our property, who maintains that? Because as it stands right now, in that very southwest corner, not the other okay, just go farther to the west. No, you're just to the west, yeah, now go, yep, keep going. They're right there. In that corner, there's 5 dead ash trees. Right now, they left a 30-foot strip, well, actually, it's probably 50-foot in that area there's a bunch of dead ash trees in there. And as I speak, I think that if it's in right with the city's ordinance, that if you're a property owner and you know those trees are dead, you can't leave them standing there. They have to be taken down, or they assume liability. And it's like, a lot of it's all buckthorn and that's growing there. That's an invasive thing, and I don't want it to grow up. If they put up a fence or we put up a fence and that grows on ours, why do I want it destroyed just because of the invasive weed? And are they still going to maintain a tree line on that very southern fence line all the way down? I don't, are they going to leave those trees up? Because, and as it's proposed right now, the water flow, as I look at the elevation plan, if they did put the berm in, the water will flow onto our property, because there is no ditch line on the west side of that berm. There is on the east side, but not on the west. So.
I don't have a problem with this going in, okay? We're all gonna have to deal with it, I understand that. And I told Premier the same thing. We don't have a problem with them. I would like the city to consider the low lighting, but I would also like to consider that this not get pushed through so fast that Premier works with us as far as what our needs are for all of the houses along in there. As far as a berm goes, I could see either or, but if we do a fence, I want a very high fence so we have our privacy. And I would just as soon have it on the lot line. We've enjoyed the property for many years as far as the wildlife goes and stuff like that. We still have wildlife here and there. My question is, to the south, right, the 3, yes, all the way along in there. There's still quite a bit of woods there. I don't feel, in my opinion, that we should be taking all those woods out. You've got a lot of nice woods in that area. Being that you have that middle part for their area for recreation, it would only help everybody in the country aspect to leave a little bit of that woods on the south side. We're not asking for much, but we want them to work with us. The fencing is a big thing. I don't want a 5-foot fence. I want a bigger fence. I want my privacy. You're bringing city to country, and I get it. It's inevitable. But I don't think that this needs to be talked about a little bit more than just moving forward and saying, yeah, we're going to do it and that's it. You know, especially for the people of the town of Black Wolf.
Thank you.
I'd like to
You have about 30 more seconds.
Okay. My thing is people been asking about that other 3.5 acres for the park. When are they going to develop it? And people around the area would like to be able to use it because they've asked me, what are they going to do? And how come it's not being maintained right now? The city just lets it grow. I understand now where they're getting their other little 10% of the park in the center there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there any other members of the public? Please approach the podium and state your name and address for our records.
Kathy Hughes, 4046 Oregon Street. Talking about the fences, the four of us, only the three who are not here, have all agreed that they would prefer a fence. And the thing is, our woods are going to be gone. We're going to be exposed. And so those of us who are not going to have the tree line any longer, we'll put up a fence possibly. Our neighbors may put up a chain link fence. The other neighbors may put up a tree line, and the other people may put up boards. They don't care. They want their privacy. And I would just like you to consider that part of our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this? Any other members of the public wish to speak on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period. Plan Commission, the action is upon you.
Motion to adopt the recommendations and findings stated in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Ms. Prop.
I heard at least 4 items that I want to comment on. One of them is the increased lighting. Did I hear you say that before the police department complained or commented that there was like 0-foot candles on the driveway?
Yes, I believe most of the paved area is at 0-foot candles.
Yeah, so the photometric plan that was submitted with the wall packs only, a large portion of the access drive aisles was at 0-foot candlelight, which is what the police department had concerns with. From a
But I have concern about that.
from a sept head standpoint, they had some concerns.
If I were to live out there, I would want some lighting on that drive area. And perhaps we can compromise. So there's some lighting. Because 0 to me is dangerous. And I don't always have, I'm not expecting to carry a flashlight, at my old residential area.
So if Plan Commission is supportive of something between base code and proposed wall packs only, you could add a condition to the request that final lighting plan be approved by community development, give us an opportunity to work kind of with the developers, the neighbors, the police department to find middle ground on what is. And I was quickly just pulling up what was done as phase one. Phase one does have all the light poles that would have been kind of standard to meet our typical code. So that does exist in phase one. If you're supportive of kind of reducing it to a degree, like you said, you could add that condition within it and give us, the ability to try to find common ground between the interested parties.
I have a few more comments, but I'll let people speak.
Okay. Any other comment on the motion on the floor from the Plan Commission? Ms. Prop?
I did notice that Ripple access was chained off, and I was startled by that. Why?
That was the initial approval. That was done as an emergency access point only when phase one was developed. That was specifically designed that way as an emergency access point only. Precedes my time here, so I can't tell you why that decision was made. I don't know if.
No, we're going to go on that. This is something that happened years ago. It's in my neighborhood as well, so I don't know why, but it's there.
Well, personally, not my neighborhood, I don't like it. I find it's dangerous not to have a second access point because it's chained. If there is an emergency, how are you going to get the darn chain down and get people out? But anyway, so in other words, that's off the table because that's in the other development.
Correct.
And if there are, I was out there, but we couldn't see in that far to the far south property line. And so if there are natural woods there, I understand why they would like to keep them. And I don't know if that's something we can enter in on or not.
So that is already, the final landscaping is already conditioned to be approved by staff. So, again, this is a situation where we can work with the developer and the neighbors to see. Now, obviously, this gets tricky when we get into some of these wooded situations where they'll have to probably survey those trees that are there and make sure they reside on their side of the property line, not the other side of the property line, because we can only obviously affect what is legally fully enclosed on their site plan. The landscape code gives you additional points for keeping existing vegetation whenever possible. So, that's something we can work with the developer and say, are any of those trees on your property? Can we continue to give you credit for them through the zoning ordinance as opposed to adding additional, some of the trees that are shown in this plan? The flexibility is already built in the code for us to work with the developer on that and see if there is anything that can be added there.
Okay, then
Or
personally,
retained there, not added.
I would appreciate that. And one last thing. I don't know how we deal with the fence request.
So this is a PD, and they're asking for asking for base standards. That gives you some discretion on, you could add a condition that you believe a fence is required instead of the berm. As there are a number of base standards being requested, you have some leeway here to recommend as you see appropriate. That is within your discretion.
So code-wise, city-wise, it's either a berm or a fence?
As proposed, it fully meets code. The combination of fencing and berming and setback is code compliant. However, because it's a PD and they're asking for base standards, you have some flexibility to insert your desire there. If you would want a fence for all of it, you could say instead of a berm, we want a fence along the entire buffer yard.
But as proposed now by the developer,
Yep.
the fence is where?
So there's a section here. I'll talk loudly, hopefully the mic picks me up. Section of fence, section of berm, section of fence.
Oh, okay, there's a combination.
Makes
And
it-
where the berm is, no fence as proposed right now.
Correct.
How tall is the fence?
6 foot vinyl, solid vinyl.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Is that, 6 foot, is that, can it go to 8 foot, or is it?
I'm looking right now because I was trying to anticipate your question. Bear with me a second. I believe 6 is for this zoning district.
I believe with it being residential zoning, yeah, I believe it's 6 foot maximum, and commercial zoning allows up to 8 feet, but we'll find out in a second here for sure.
Yeah, 6 feet would be the max. Now, again, we are in a planned development realm here, so that is something you could additionally consider if you wanted a taller fence. You know, I would, suggest you talk to or ask the developer if they're willing to do an 8-foot fence or interest in 8-foot fence. But if you wanted, say, an 8-foot instead of a 6-foot, you could again add a base standard modification in saying 8-foot fence along that property line. That's discretion Plan Commission has that they can make. They can include those type of base standards.
Personally, we'll suggest that we do that later.
Ms. Davy?
Is there any advantage to having the berm there?
So the way the code is drafted is to provide flexibility and options, and I think we heard a little bit of it, and Brian was at the neighborhood meeting. There become situations where some neighbors prefer berm with landscaping on it. Some neighbors prefer a fence. The code is written in a way to give flexibility for whichever option is appropriate for that circumstance. There is benefits to both of those situations. There's drawbacks of both of those situations. So the code is simply designed to give both options where appropriate.
Mr. Kulbali, did you have a comment?
Yeah. But before we vote on the staff recommendation, I like, given the gray on the lighting, the plan for lighting and the fence, I like to move that we have a revised light plan and fence and landscaping be subject to staff approval.
So you're offering a friendly amendment to add a condition that the light plan be compromise negotiation with the planning department.
We would use similar language to what the landscape section says. Final lighting plan to be approved by Department of Community Development, and then we understand the direction of this. Again, ultimately, assuming council approves it at the end of the day, if that is included in there, then we'll work to facilitate that.
Yes, that's the motion.
So we need
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on that. There has to be discussion on the motion and second to the original motion and second. So we have a motion and second on the floor.
So at this point with an amendment, we can take that up because it then becomes part of the
motion, the original motion.
Yep.
Okay, we have that. Is there additional discussion on this? Mr. Kiefer?
I think there was a photo in the very beginning of showing some of the wooded areas.
Can we first
now.
can we first finish discussion on the motion for lighting?
Lighting, that's
Sorry.
the-
Yep.
Lighting is the only motion.
Motion and lighting. I'm going to give it, I do believe that there needs to be some kind of compromise. I hear the neighbors, I hear the developer, I'm supportive of both, but I'm also hearing very loudly the concern of the police department, and so I do believe that there is a way to figure something out in order to make this right, and hopefully work with all parties on that, so I'm in favor of that motion. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Okay, so we vote on that
We can
motion.
vote to
We're going
include
to take a roll call vote on the motion to allow the lighting plan to be, you have to say it.
Yeah, the final lighting plan to be approved during site plan review.
During site plan review. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Esslinger,
Aye.
Ms. Prop,
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kulabali, Ms. Davy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer,
Aye.
Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
So the motion for the lighting is carried. Now we're going back to the original motion
As amended.
as amended. Any other discussion on the original motion, Mr. Kiefer?
I was trying to say is that there seems like there's a lot of vegetation there, and I'd really like to see, you're putting this berm in, it seems like you're kind of taking vegetation out that's already there. Put the berm in, to put more vegetation on top. I mean, I'd like to be able to see as much of vegetation that is already there stay there, be cleaned up, the ash trees and any other dead trees or invasive trees be removed, cleaned up, but what is left, and again, having not seen the site or, stepped foot on the site, I can't tell you exactly what's there, but I think that, let's go with what we have there and not try to reinvent the wheel kind of thing or reestablish it when it's already there. And I think the fencing option is something that we should, that should be considered as well. Working with the neighbors there to provide an adequate fencing that's going to be appropriate for the area as well. So.
I'm going to comment that what is the feasibility of a berm and a fence? Because we're talking about a 5-foot berm, a 6-foot fence. It's only a foot difference. So what about a berm and a fence?
So it gets a little tricky. Really, the slope of your berm determines your ability to put a fence on top of it or not. The code is specifically designed from a standpoint of disallowing someone to create a very steep berm and then put a fence on and say, well, I meet my 6-foot fence standard. I only have a 6-foot fence. It's done in that way to facilitate kind of the prohibition of someone using a very steep berm to get around fencing standards. If it is a gradual berm, and there's some language in the code that I can look up if we need to, that if you have a certain slope and the top of it is a certain dimension in width, you can then fence on top of it. Looking at their grades, just very quickly, I was trying to take a peek. I would say the berm as designed presently would not permit a fence on top of it because it is a steeper berm. It's not a berm that was designed simply for creating a visual barrier, not necessarily designed to facilitate an area to plant on top of it.
Okay. Ms. Prop.
I find the idea of a fence on top of the berm awkward anyway. I thought we were either asking for a perimeter fence or the berm. And I heard the neighbors say perimeter fence. And I'd be willing to condition an 8-foot fence, if that's the case.
Okay, any other, Ms. Davy?
Brian, when you mentioned the fence, and you said it was a vinyl fence, can you describe that to me? Is that like the metal with the vinyl going through this way, or is what?
Yeah, entirely vinyl, uniform fence. Looks like wood, only it's
Okay.
a vinyl finish.
You think about like the white vinyl fences you see.
Okay.
I'm just using that as an example. That's a fully vinyl
I was
fence.
envisioning this, and I'm thinking that's really ugly.
No, that would be chain link slatted, which would not meet code.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Essinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just thinking maybe in the interest of making things very simple, I'm a simple guy and I'm thinking we've got lighting issues, we have berms, we have vegetation, other issues here, and we can, as we've done, we have one amendment to address one issue. It sounds like to me, and this the neighbors here, this is their home, and so their input should weigh very, very heavy, in my opinion, on this board and for the council. So I just say we go back, we let the staff go back to the residents here and with the petitioner to iron this stuff out. I mean, we're talking about a 6-foot fence or a 7-foot fence or an 8-foot fence and a berm, no berm. Well, this stuff needs to get figured out, and I guess we can insert our opinions on what we should do here, but we're not living there. Maybe one person is close, but I just think there's a lot of things that need to be figured out here, and we can sit here for another hour and try to implement something that we feel is appropriate, but it may not ultimately be appropriate for the people that are affected because this is their home. So I don't know if that's an amendment or what, but I just think there's many things that need to be figured out here.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? We do have a motion on the floor. Kathy has suggested that we add an 8-foot fence to the areas, but it does sound like that there needs to be some further discussion. Ms. Prop.
I don't want to delay things for the developer. Could this be laid over to the next meeting?
So the next meeting, I have to look at the state statute. Obviously, once filed, we have a statute-driven timeline to act on things, unless the developer is willing to waive that timeline. Typically, I would say lay it over 2 weeks and we'll take it back up. Unfortunately, 2 weeks from today is 4th of July, so there is no first plan commission meeting in July. So to lay this over would put it at
July 18th.
July 18th. Sometimes what we've done in these situations is plan commission weighs in and we delay it going to council by 2 weeks because council obviously has that July 11th meeting that we could try to facilitate discussion between neighbors, developer, and then bring to council that kind of common plan. So that is an opportunity as well.
So can I just ask a question perhaps to the developer? Is he mentioned in his speech that that berm was something that he had kind of talked about to help the neighbors out as opposed to a fence? Did you have a fence before and switch to a berm, or has it always been a berm and taller now? I mean, what's...
Yeah, we can't call the developer back up at this stage.
You'd have to reopen the floor. if you want.
Sorry, well, it just feels like we don't have the full story, I guess, of how this is going.
It may benefit you to open the floor back up and get there. They may be very willing to just say, okay, let's do an 8-foot fence and call it a day. It may benefit you to bring them up, and you might be able to resolve it.
Sure, that was just the question I have, because that was kind of a comment from him, and the neighbor said something very different, and so I don't know what the disagreement is there.
Right, we could add another amendment to the original thing to say up to an 8-foot fence, subject to development with the planning department between the parties. And then that way we've moved on the motion, we've allowed some of the details to be taken care of so it can go to council in an appropriate time frame.
I would make that motion then.
I'll second it.
I don't know what I said.
Yeah, we'll get it to allow it up to 8-foot fence
So
for
it's
the buffer
another
yard.
amendment to the motion.
Up
You're
to,
allowing flexibility, it's the basis of your motion.
right, allowing flexibility so that way it can get to council hopefully on the 11th or by the 11th in order to move forward with the project.
Meanwhile, the three folks can get together.
Right. Okay, so now we have another amendment. And we would need a second of that amendment.
Somebody
Somebody
Kathy, I
did
believe,
second?
yeah.
Okay, so now discussion on that amendment.
Doesn't look like it.
I see none, so roll call vote on that amendment.
Okay. Councilmember Esslinger.
Aye.
Ms. Prop.
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein.
Aye.
Mr. Colabali.
Aye.
Ms. Davy.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer. Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Amendment carried 7-0.
All right, now we have the original motion with two amendments. Any further discussion on that? Okay, I'm seeing none, so let's have a roll call vote.
Great. Councilmember Esslinger.
Aye.
Ms. Prop.
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein.
Aye.
Mr. Colabali.
Aye.
Ms. Davy.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer.
Aye.
Chairman Perry.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
All right, thank you. Item number 5 on our agenda is a public hearing. Text amendments to the zoning ordinance related to projecting signs. The Department of Community Development is the owner and applicant. I assume there were no site inspections, so we will, we're going to just pause for just a bit. Okay, I'm gonna call item number 5 again. It's a public hearing with text amendments to the zoning ordinance related to projecting signs. So the Department of Community Development is the owner and applicant. There were no site visits, so I will accept the staff report as part of the record.
He'll be back.
And that's Mark, right?
Either or.
Okay.
Yeah, well, because Brian,
Yeah.
can you
So-
take that outside, please?
Yeah.
Sorry about
I
that.
had him for 1 second, so I had a question.
All right, so this is a request to update the zoning ordinance to allow addition to the currently allowed projecting signs under the ordinance. We have had some businesses in the center city area request to have additional projecting sign area beyond what code currently allows. As some of those sites have narrow frontages, their existing wall signs and projecting signs are already at the maximum, and they wanted to have an additional blade sign to identify the business more for pedestrian-oriented traffic. Staff looked into it, we've thought that adding, in addition to the code maximum of a 2 square foot blade sign, for, under the projecting sign ordinance would be appropriate. That's basically all it is just adding that addition to what's already allowed of 2 square feet for a blade sign.
I'll jump in because I missed the conversation. This is essentially just fully derived from that Roger Brooks study that was done by Discover Oshkosh. One of the recommendations on that is we find a way to add flexibility to add that pedestrian level, pedestrian-oriented signage. This is our code change to try to help facilitate some of the recommendations that came out of that study, some of what we've heard from the bid on wanting to have these type of signs be included.
Can you just describe more in layman's terms?
So are there any technical questions to the Plan Commission staff? Mr. Kiefer?
Can you describe more in layman's terms? I'm looking at this picture, I see a person here that's, you know, not, unless it's a 2-foot person.
Let me fire up the other computer quick and we'll talk.
You
at
said
the same
2
time.
foot, and I'm like,
2 foot, so if you've been downtown and you see the
How
signs
big
that
is
are
this
on,
sign, right?
Wagner's Market, elsewhere, whatever else where it is, coffee shop. They're, you know, this big, they stick out, they're just an emblem that has the business name on them or the business logo. That's what we're talking about. They stick out from the building. Does that help, or you still want me? I can pull up and kind of show you a little clearer if need be. And the reason this is being proposed as it is, a lot of the businesses in the downtown had signage that predated the 2017 sign ordinance. So they're already maxed or above what our wall sign allotment allows. And currently under the code, these count towards that same allotment. So they already have a wall sign that likely predated the 2017 code update, and they wouldn't be allowed to just add this very small projecting sign. This amendment gives them that ability, even though they're already at or over the normal wall sign allotment, to add that same wall sign, or that same blade sign is the rest of the bid area.
Ms. Prop?
Is this limited to the downtown area? Or
No.
This is citywide.
Looking at it, I mean, ultimately, as these are pedestrian scale signs, we only envision them typically being used in the downtown, but if someone else wanted to use them elsewhere, I don't really see a negative of allowing it citywide.
Any other technical questions for staff? Mr. Essinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a question for staff on previous. Back when I was on the council, I forget what year it was, but we didn't allow projecting signs at all. And as a council member, I brought forward to allow for that. And then the staff brought forward criteria for that and the square footage of the sign, which it was so small, it was ridiculous. And at that time, I said, I think we need to, you know, allow more of these things. If you look at pictures of downtown Oshkosh in the 1930s and 40s with the signs down there, in my personal opinion, I think it's gorgeous. And when we moved away from that, I think the looks of downtown deteriorated. So I think this is a good step to bring that back. So I'm glad to see the staff is working with someone and listening to people's opinions that this is needed. I guess I'm just wondering, the criteria that you have here, 4 feet beyond the structure, 3 feet from the established curb line, you know, all of that, does that change the maximum square footage of the sign? And how did you come up with these numbers?
Yeah. So we looked at what are typically done. So a bit of nuance. It still allows anyone to do a normal projecting sign, so the larger variation of a projecting sign, a business could still choose to do those. So to your comment about kind of the historic nature where you had some of those larger blade projecting style signs, those are still allowed. This doesn't change anything related to those. Those signs are still considered as part of your wall sign package. So those are when it's more of a design decision by the applicant. Do they want something flat on the building or do they want to stick it out? This specifically, when we looked at what is typically done for pedestrian-oriented signs, these are those signs that when that individual is walking down the sidewalk, they see it hanging lower than the typical wall sign, and it helps them identify a business as they're at that pedestrian scale walking down. From what we found, 2 square feet was kind of in the norm of what that pedestrian blade sign was being done at.
So is projecting sign and blade sign two different things?
Correct. What we're doing now is separating them out. We're making a special category for just the small blade signs. Projecting signs still permitted under the normal code requirements.
Okay, so I guess my comments are more directed towards the projecting sign.
Yeah, so those standards are what was done as part of the 2017 code update, and they're pretty typical of what is done, with the 8-foot minimum clearance. Those are for safety concerns. The distance it extends out. Those were all done as the 17 code update is kind of industry standard for that type of signage.
Okay. The sign that the Grand Opera House has now.
Yep.
What size is that? Can someone downtown on Main Street from the 100 block to the 1100 block, are they allowed to have a sign of that size, neon sign or whatever?
So of that size, no. The Grand specifically came through this board and council to get that size and style of a sign because of its scale that it was. It exceeded any allowed standards. But they came through, worked through it. They limited other signage on other walls to go with one big kind of grandiose marquee style sign. Hell, I didn't think when I said that, but yeah. And we've done that throughout the city where individuals have came to Plan Commission and Council and said, instead of doing, these signs on every wall that we're allowed, we want to kind of consolidate them into one large design. And that's been approved.
So then what are the standards for a projecting sign now?
Let me grab the code.
Well, I think it's all listed in here. So
Maximum size.
it still falls under wall signage for size. So if you have a 25 square foot frontage, you could have a 25 square foot projecting sign plus then your 2-foot blade sign as well.
If you had 50 feet of building wall, you could have a 50-foot sign. So our wall and ultimately the full projecting signs are based on a calculation in the code. You get 1 square foot of sign area per linear foot of building wall.
And that was changed in 2017?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm looking at,
All right, Mr. Kiefer.
I'm looking at the pictures of the Wagner's. So they have a little sign on the corner right now.
Yep.
Doesn't look very big.
That's the blade sign that we're proposing. Those were put up without permits and against code.
And then they have overhang that has market on the front. Is that considered what the blade?
No, the blade is those little white ones.
The other projecting sign?
Yeah, theirs is I don't know if it's considered a marquee sign. The one where it's got the canopy and it sets on top.
Yeah.
That's part of their typical allowed code compliant signage. The small one that you're seeing, those small white ones are what this code amendment is designed to facilitate.
Any other technical questions for the staff at this time? Ms. Davy?
Just to clarify, when you say 2 square feet for the blade sign, so it could be 24 inches by 12 inches, or it could be 6 inches by 48 inches if it didn't.
So there's a maximum projection.
Yeah, so it can't project more than 4 feet from the structure.
Yes. Based on what the math you just did, yes.
Okay.
Yes, for example, this is what the code is designed to help facilitate. This is one on Wager's Market. I think elsewhere in Market, we go down the street a little bit here. Did I go too far? I did not go far enough.
How old is that picture?
This was September of 22.
I think it's that
Yeah,
building.
so you can see them similar here. And some of the businesses in the downtown have done them and were permitted in because they were under the maximum allowed wall area. So they were able to facilitate them in a relatively easy format. Others are at their maximum allowed wall signage, so they're not permitted to do them or did them without permits. This would help facilitate everybody kind of having even playing field for those small signs.
Okay, any other technical questions for Plan Commission staff? Okay, I see none, so this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Does the Department of Community Development wish to make a statement? Seeing none. I'm going to open the public hearing is open now for members of the public who wish to speak. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this agenda item? Any members of the public wish to speak on this agenda item? And I'm seeing none, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Plan Commission, the action is on you.
Motion to adopt findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Esslinger?
Aye.
Ms. Prop?
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Kulabali? Ms. Davy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer?
Aye.
Chairman Perry?
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, item number 6 is a public hearing. It's a preview of the 2023 Annual Action Plan Community Development Block Grant Program. Department of Community Development is the owner and applicant. There are no site inspections. I will let you know that I will only be calling this and not be voting. So I'll ask for the staff report to be part of the summary. Please present your summary.
My name is Emily Tardif, Grants Coordinator in the Department of Community Development for the Commission. For this item, the Plan Commission is being asked to make a determination of consistency that the proposed activities in the CDBG action plan are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan as updated in any other official maps or other planned activities of the city, and recommending approval of the plan submission to HUD to the City Council. What is laid out in the staff report under 2023 entitlement allocations is what staff is proposing for projects to be carried out, those being Central City redevelopment, public facilities, public services, administration, and fair housing activities. One thing I wanted to highlight in the staff report is a reallocation of prior year funds. 2020 housing rehab funds are being reallocated to 2023 Central City redevelopment, and 2022 public facilities and 2022 neighborhood initiative funds are being reallocated to 2023 public facilities. That is what I have for you. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Plan Commission, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so just to quickly jump in. So this is kind of the typical plan we see every year come through as part of the HUD requirements for block grant. We have to go through the public process of holding public hearings and providing to council a copy of our action plan. This one's just a little unique this year in that we do have some unused previous funds that we want to reallocate as well. Some projects kind of came in a little under what was anticipated, so we have some of those remaining funds. We have one project that just ended up not getting off the ground, so we want to make sure we reallocate those funds, get them out into the community. So I said this is kind of what you guys have seen for the last number of years for those who have been on. Ultimately, it'll go on to council for their recommendation. Basically, council then allows or approves us the ability to submit it for HUD. HUD still has to approve it because, you know, it's their money. That's what they like to do. But from a plan commission standpoint, what we're looking at is, you know, are these activities that we are proposing consistent and appropriate to comprehensive plan? So when you look at, you know, Central City redevelopment, that's consistent with our comp plan as we're looking at how we make improvements into the Center City area. That's anything from housing to street improvements. So those would be consistent. Public facilities, I'm sure most of you are familiar with a number of the projects we've done over the years. Day-by-day warming shelters, just maybe the most recent example of some of the block grant funding that has assisted. Public service agencies, you know, every year we help facilitate a bunch of public service agencies. They can apply for some funding that's been going on for a long time here in Oshkosh and it benefits the community. And then finally, the administrative cost to help cover the cost of then providing all of those programs.
Any questions from the Plan Commission? Ms. Davy?
I just have a comment. I'd really like to commend Emily on getting 61 pages into less than a minute.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the Plan Commission? All right, seeing none, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing and allow the applicant to speak if they wish. they choose not to speak?
Well, thank you.
All right. So, any member of the public that wish to speak on this public hearing in this particular agenda item? Any member of the public wish to speak on this agenda item? All right, seeing none, I'm closing the public hearing. Plan Commission, the action is on you.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Esslinger?
Aye.
Ms. Prop?
Aye.
Mr. Lowenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Colabali?
Aye.
Ms. Davy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Kiefer?
Aye.
Chairman Perry?
Present.
Motion carried 6-0.
All right, last item on the agenda is adjournment.
So moved?
We have a motion,
Second.
second, and we will have a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. We have 2 workshops tonight.
So.